All right, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about factor by grouping. Factoring by grouping means that, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to group terms together and we're going to factor out the greatest common factor from each of the two groups that we construct or that we manufacture. And then what our goal is when we do that, we should get another greatest common factor that we can factor out. So let me show you. Okay, so in these examples here. So what we're going to do is we're going to group the first two terms and the last two terms. Okay, so all we're going to do. So we're going to group this and say, okay, we're going to say 2ax minus 6ay plus 5x minus 15y. So that's all we've done. Okay, now I'm going to look for a greatest common factor here. And so in this case here, I've got a 2 that I can factor out. I've got an a that I can factor out. So that's going to leave me with what? It's going to leave me with x minus 3y. Okay? Now, what can I factor out over here? I can factor out a 5. So I'm going to write 5, and then what's left over? I get x minus 3y. Now this is where you want to look, because notice how now we've got another common factor. Okay? By factoring out the greatest common factor here and here, we now have another common factor that we can see now. And so now that I've got them grouped, now I can factor out this factor and this factor, because again, notice that they're the same. Okay, so that's one of the mistakes you want to avoid, is sometimes when you do the factor by grouping, you want to make sure that this factor here is the same. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to factor out this factor and this factor. So I'm going to factor it out. So I'm going to factor out the x minus 3y. Now, what's left over? Well, the 2a will be left behind plus 5. And so now it's in completely factored form. And that is factor by grouping. So what you do is, again, you group the terms, as I did here, and then you're going to factor out the greatest common factor from each group, and then that should reveal another common factor that you can factor out, and you get your final result. Okay? And now you've got this product of two binomials. All right? Okay, let's do it again here. So again, we're just going to group the two together, right? So m squared minus 3n plus 3m minus mn. Okay? Now, I can't factor out anything here. And here I've got a common factor of m. If I factor out the m, I don't get the same thing. So that didn't work. So let's do it a different way. Sometimes the groupings don't work the way we want them to. So let's do this. Let's put the 3m and the m squared together. So we'll do m squared plus 3m. And then what we'll do is we'll take, the minus 3n. So we'll do the negative, right? Minus mn. Now, I can factor out the -1 here and just make this a subtraction. But just make sure that you factor out the -1. So if you want to make this a subtraction, then this would be plus and that would be plus. So you could do it that way too. Just make sure you watch your signs. Okay? Now, if I do the greatest common factor here, I get m, which leaves me m plus 3 minus, and then I can factor out an n from here, and I get what? I get m, well, let me write it the way, I don't want to switch things around yet. And if I do this, I get 3 plus m. Now notice that this is m plus 3 and 3 plus m, but using the commutative property, I can just switch those and write this as m plus 3, so you can better see that they are a common factor, right? So this has the same common factor. So now if I factor out the m plus 3, so I'm going to factor it out, pull it out. So m plus 3, now what's left over? I get left over an m minus n. And there's the final factored form. Okay? Now also, just so you know, you can get different forms when you factor this out. Okay? For example, you might get, if you did it differently, you might get, instead of this, you might get a negative out, right? So you might end up with a different thing, like, for example, I'm trying to think. I could get a negative, right? You could have got a negative, and then this could be n minus n. Okay, so again, if you get something different, that's okay. Just make sure when you factor everything back out, you get back to the original problem. So again, if you're ever in doubt, just check your work by going backwards and see if you get back to the original problem. All right. Have a great day.